Hello everyone, it's been a couple of minutes since my last video. Work and everything gets piled up and you don't realize how much time has gone by. But I wanted to do this video. It's kind of it's a tribute, and it's about 5 years. I can't believe this album is 5 years old. It's a tribute to one of my favorite, I would say, albums ever. This album really surprised me when it came out back in 2016. And of course, by the title of the video, you can already tell I'm talking about "Good Times" by the Monkees, which came out in 2016 in correlation with the Monkees' 50th anniversary. Now, before this album, the Monkees had attempted a few reunions, on again, off again, depending on the variation of members of who was available. Of course, at the end of the Monkees in the 60s into the early 70s, of course, the Monkees are Mickey Dolenz, Davy Jones, Mike Nesmith, and Peter Tork. And of course, they were a fabricated band made specifically for a television show, the Monkees, in the 60s. But they morphed into a real band. They actually went on tour. Their albums went much higher in the charts than the television company ever thought would happen. And they toured together for several years, essentially ending the show in the late 60s. After that, they kind of fizzled out. First, Peter Tork left the group, and then Mike Nesmith a couple albums later, and then finally it was just it was Mickey and Davy to do a final album together for contractual agreements. And then not much came of it. They all went on to do separate tours, separate ventures in business and film. And they eventually, they had, like I said, there was a couple of albums. There was an album in the 80s called Pull It, and then the original four Monkees got together again in the 90s for this album Justice, Just Us. So it was just the four of them doing all the instrumentation and the songs. But after that, not much from the Monkees camp. There were some tensions between the group members, various members. Mike Nesmith was really big into production for film. He had his own company. Mickey became a director. He actually directed some Disney shows in the 80s and 90s, especially one in particular that comes to mind is Boy Meets World. And Davey did his thing. Now, they all had minor solo careers, but nothing compared to the Monkey Mania. But anyway, long story short, the Monkees, of course, they were up there with the Beatles in terms of sales, in terms of popularity. Girls screaming for them, passing out at concerts, like the classic footage that you see of the 60s concert scene. And then, the show ended and, the Monkees weren't cool anymore. You had groups like Led Zeppelin come out, Pink Floyd, that sort of thing became the new cool. Singer-songwriter stuff started coming out with James Taylor and Carole King, Neil Diamond. And with King and Neil Diamond, of course, they got their start, writing songs before they were solo artists, and they both contributed, to some hits by the Monkees. And what's neat about Good Times, I'm skipping ahead of myself. Davy Jones, the Manchurian Cowboy, as he was called. You can see there's an archival picture of him there from probably '66. He sadly passed away. I believe 2012. I believe is when it was. And so, of course, the hopes of having the quartet of the Monkees back together is impossible. And so their last album, when they were all four alive, was called Justice. And people were like, well, the Monkees, they had their thing, they had a couple of minor tours, and they were touring with Davey actually when he passed away. it was Mike, Peter, and Davey, and then when Davey passed, excuse me, it was Mickey, Peter, and Davey touring, and then after Davey passed away, Mike Nesmith, who's always been, hot and cold with the Monkees, he agreed to finish the tour with Peter and Mickey, and actually since then, and we lost Peter Tork back in 2019. He's actually, Mike and Mickey are kind of doing their thing together now as Mike and Mickey singing Monkees tunes. But anyway, that's a whole other video, Monkees history. To get to the point of this album, the Monkees wanted to celebrate their 50th anniversary, and they enlisted the help, or I should say Rhino Music, who put out the record, enlisted the help of some popular indie songwriters and indie artists, including Andy Partridge, Rivers Cuomo of Weezer, Noel Gallagher of Oasis, and then his own High Flying Birds group, Ben Gibbard of Death Cab for Cutie. They wrote songs in the vein of what the Monkees did, but they had their own modern flair to it. So really about half of this album is made up of songs that were in the can from back in the 60s. I mean, the opening song itself, and the title track, Good Times, is a duet between Mickey Dolenz and his old friend Harry Nilsson. He was his old drinking buddy in the Hollywood Vampires group, rock and rollers that would go around and drink and party. Alice Cooper and Ringo Starr were both in that group with Mickey Dolenz and Harry Nilsson. And so the actual title song of this album is part new vocals and instrumentation with Mickey, and then it's the original demo vocal of Harry Nilsson singing the track. And so it's kind of neat. And Harry Nilsson has since passed away. He passed away several years ago. So it was neat for Mickey to sing with his old friend, and I've seen interviews where he talks about how neat that was to sing with Harry Nilsson. And then one of the first singles by Andy Partridge of XTC, You Bring the Summer, just a really nice, bright 60s style pop song. It keeps going. She Makes Me Laugh is the song after that, written by Rivers Cuomo of Weezer. Another just summery sounding song. And then there are some other songs. Actually, the next one I should say is Our Own World, which was written by Adam Schlesinger. He's the bass player and backing vocalist of Fountains of Wayne, who we tragically lost last year from COVID. He was one of the early celebrities that actually was affected by it, and was killed as a result of it. And he was young. I think he was 51 or 2 when he passed away. But Adam Schlesinger, who I believe was the full, it was produced and mixed by Adam Schlesinger. So his fingerprint is all over this album. And he actually worked on their follow-up album to this, which came out a couple years later, their Christmas album, their Christmas Party album. And all the Monkees share lead vocal duties on these songs. I mean, you got a good mix of Mickey Dolenz songs and Mike Nesmith. Mike actually gave one of his own songs, I Know What I Know, which is the second to last song on this album. But really, and Peter Tork, he sings a couple songs, including an old Carole King song called Wasn't Born to Follow, which was, I believe that was used in the movie Easy Rider in 1969. The Byrds, actually, the later incarnation of the Byrds, sang it. And Peter just knocks it out of the park. I mean, and it's sad to think that during this time, Peter Tork was actually dealing with his own health problems with what eventually took his life, his mouth cancer. But what I think is the track of tracks on this song, and possibly the greatest Monkees track ever, is the song Me and Magdalena, which is a duet with Mike Nesmith and Mickey Dolenz. It was written by Ben Gibbard of Death Cab for Cutie, which, once you know that, you can hear it as a Death Cab for Cutie song if you've at all listened to their music. simplistic in form with light piano touches. But man, I know I've seen interviews with Mickey Dolenz where he said he kind of fought for this song. He wanted to be the one singing lead vocals on it, but Mike kind of beat him out on it. So Mickey adds the higher harmonies on it. And if you want to hear a good song, listen to Me and Magdalena, because it's just beautiful. And following tours after this album, Ben Gibbard has come out and actually sung the song with them, which is really neat to see the writer actually singing it with the Monkees. And that had to have been a thrill for him to write a song for the Monkees. But this is such a good album. I wish I could say more about it. It doesn't sound cliche, but you need to listen to this album if you like the '60s music, and even if you take the Monkees out of the picture, if you or somebody that says, "Oh, that's just the Monkees," this is just a good album. I mean, it's really a good album, and I highly recommend it. Definitely check it out. I mean, it's still you can still find it anywhere. Just good '60s sounding pop music with a modern twist on it, and with all four Monkees on it. Even Davey, they took an old song that he recorded from back in the '60s, "Love to Love," and so you have a Davey song on there from the '60s. So all four Monkees are represented on the album, and it's really neat to see them all together. I would say one more time, but they actually had another album that came out 2 years later, their Christmas album. But check out "Good Times" by the Monkees. You will not be disappointed. It's just a perfect album in my opinion. So check it out. Let me know what you think. Take care.